Welcome to the untold story of Don Ashby, a hockey hero whose legacy burns brighter than any spotlight. Born in Kamloops, British Columbia in 1955, Don was destined for the ice, his skates carving a path from backyard rinks to the NHL's grand stage. A center with unmatched vision, he dazzled with no-look passes and a work ethic that inspired legends like Wayne Gretzky. From the Toronto Maple Leafs to the Edmonton Oilers, Don's journey was one of grit, heart, and quiet brilliance, until a tragic accident in 1981 cut it short at just 26. In this video, we dive deep into Don's rise, his unbreakable spirit, and the heartbreaking twist that left a void in hockey's soul. Discover why his story still resonates, from his skate the extra mile mantra to the lessons he left behind. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and join us to honor a forgotten legend whose impact echoes on every rink. Let's get started. On March 8, 1955, under a sky heavy with snow, Donald Allen Ashby was born in Kamloops, British Columbia, a rugged city cradled in the Thompson River Valley. The air carried the crisp bite of pine, and the surrounding mountains stood as silent guardians over a community where winter was both adversary and muse. In a modest hospital ward, Don lay in a bassinet, his tiny frame pulsing with a latent gift, an instinctive rhythm destined to find its expression on ice. Kamloops was a hockey crucible, where frozen ponds and backyard rinks were as integral to the landscape as the Douglas firs that lined the hills. Every child's shout, every slap of a stick, seemed to echo the nation's unspoken creed. Hockey was not just a game, but a birthright. Don, born to Alan and Margaret Ashby, entered this world as one of many, yet within him stirred a spark that would set him apart. Alan Ashby, a mechanic whose hands bore the scars of wrenches and grease, was a man of quiet dignity, his pride tempered by the stoicism of a working-class life. Margaret, a homemaker, infused their small clapboard house with warmth, her laughter a counterpoint to the howling winds that swept through their snow-lined street. Their home, modest but sturdy, was a sanctuary of routine: meals at 6, radio humming with CBC broadcasts, and the faint clatter of Alan's tools in the garage. Yet, from his earliest days, Don disrupted this rhythm with a restless energy. At 2, he'd chase a rubber ball across the kitchen linoleum with a sawed-off stick, his eyes blazing with focus. By 4, he was teetering on second-hand skates, his father's handiwork transforming their backyard into a rink under the moonlight. Neighborhood kids, bundled in scarves and mittens, would peer over the fence, awestruck by the pint-sized dynamo who seemed to glide with a purpose beyond his years. Don's childhood was a montage of motion, each moment a step toward the ice. Mornings began in darkness, his breath clouding as he trudged through snow to the local rink for 5 a.m. practices with the Kamloops Minor Hockey League. The rink, a concrete fortress with frost-laced windows, was his first cathedral, where he learned the game's sacred geometry: angles of attack, the arc of a deflected puck, the subtle dance of anticipation. Alan, often rinkside with a thermos of coffee, watched his son weave through drills, nodding at the crisp passes that found their mark or the fearless battles for pucks along the boards. Margaret, sewing patches onto Don's worn jerseys, packed post-game snacks, peanut butter sandwiches, and apples, her heart swelling as her son's shots rang off goalposts. School, with its desks and chalkboards, was a necessary interlude, but Don's true education unfolded on the ice, his heroes Gordie Howe and Jean Béliveau guiding him through endless driveway drills, where he mimicked their dekes and wrist shots. By 14, Don's talent was undeniable, earning him a spot with the Kamloops Rockets in the British Columbia Hockey League. The Rockets' rink, a cavernous barn with creaky bleachers and a faint smell of diesel, was a proving ground where dreams were tested under the glare of scouts. Don, now a lanky center with a shock of dark hair, stood 6 feet 1 inch and moved with a smooth, powerful stride that belied his youth. His game was not about flash, but substance: precise stick handling, a knack for spotting a winger's break before the play unfolded, and a saucer pass that landed with surgical precision. Coaches marveled at his vision, how he seemed to see the ice in slow motion, but it was his work ethic that set him apart. While teammates filed off after practice, Don lingered, skating laps under the flickering lights or firing pucks at a net. Each shot a silent vow to a future he could already envision. At 16, Don stepped up to the Calgary Centennials in the Western Hockey League, WHL, a league where raw promise either hardened into grit or crumbled under pressure. The WHL was a brutal odyssey. Endless bus rides across the prairies, hostile crowds in towns like Regina and Brandon, and opponents who delivered elbows to the jaw with grim enthusiasm. Don thrived in this chaos, his role as a center making him the linchpin of his line. He won face-offs with a flick of the wrist, stung goalies with a quick release, and read the defensive zone with a veteran's calm. Off the ice, he was the team's quiet anchor, defusing tension with a dry quip about a teammate's questionable haircut or a tale of a fishing trip gone comically awry. The Centennials bus, a lumbering beast dubbed the Prairie Whale, was Don's second home. On overnight hauls to Medicine Hat or Lethbridge, he'd claim a back seat, sharing headphones with a line mate as Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven, or the Guess Who's American Woman crackled through. These journeys forged a resilience no coach could teach, snoozing on a bench seat, scarfing a burger at a 4 a.m. diner in Swift Current, then stepping onto a rink so cold your breath hung like a ghost. Don's focus never wavered. His stats climbed, 52 points in his first full season, then 78 the next, with 35 goals and a reputation for delivering in the clutch. Scouts from the NHL and the World Hockey Association, WHA, filled their notebooks with praise, poised under pressure, ice vision like a chess master, their pens scratching as Don carved through defenses. His leadership was understated but magnetic. In a playoff game against the Saskatoon Blades, with the Centennials trailing by 2 in the third, Don huddled his line during a timeout. "We're not done," he said, his voice steady as steel. He won the next faceoff, powered through a bruising check, and fed a winger for the tying goal. The Centennials won in overtime, and the bus ride home was a riot of cheers, Don grinning quietly as teammates slapped his shoulder. Coach Doug Sauter later told a reporter, "Ashby's your guy in a storm, heart, brains, and guts. Most kids his age don't have half that." The 1975 NHL Draft, held in Montreal's Mount Royal Hotel, was a whirlwind of ambition and nerves. Don, 20 and dressed in a slightly oversized suit, sat among hopefuls, his palms damp with anticipation. When the Toronto Maple Leafs called his name at 6th overall, the room tilted. Kamloops, Calgary, the countless Don practices, it had all led to this moment. The Leafs, an original Six Titan, were a hockey shrine, their blue and white sweater steeped in legend. The WHA's Michigan Stags also drafted him 3rd overall that day, but the NHL's allure was undeniable. Don chose Toronto, his smile flashing through a storm of camera bulbs as he donned a Leafs cap. Toronto in 1975 was a city starved for a Stanley Cup, its last victory a fading memory from 1967. Fans saw every draft pick as a potential messiah, and Don stepped into this cauldron with the calm he'd honed in junior. Rookie camp was a grueling gauntlet of drills, but Don shone, his passes crisp, his positioning textbook, his willingness to grind in the corners earning nods from coaches. His NHL debut came against the Pittsburgh Penguins, centering a third line, his skates cutting the ice with a rookie's hunger. A week later, he notched his first point, an assist on a Darryl Sittler goal, and Maple Leaf Gardens erupted, sensing a new chapter. Don's game was a marriage of finesse and tenacity. He could thread a no-look pass through a defender's legs, then pivot to block a shot in his own end. His vision was his hallmark. Teammates swore he saw plays unfold in a dimension others missed. In a December clash with the Boston Bruins, he flipped a blind backhand pass to spring a winger on a breakaway, leaving the bench slack-jawed. "Kid's got radar," Coach Red Kelly grumbled, a rare smile tugging at his lips. Off the ice, Don navigated Toronto's spotlight with a rookie's unease, mobbed by fans at Yonge Street diners. Sports writers dubbed him the thinking man's center, a nod to his cerebral play, and he'd deflect the praise with a self-deprecating jab at his skating stride, which he called a plow horse trying to dance. The NHL, however, was no storybook. Toronto's roster churned like a storm, with veterans like Dave Keon traded and coaches shuffling lines. Don's ice time ebbed and flowed, the pressure to produce goals clashing with his two-way role. By his second season, he'd tallied 19 goals and 23 assists in 76 games. Respectable, but not the fireworks fans craved. Critics clamored for flash, overlooking the intangibles that defined him. Face-off wins, defensive clears, the quiet confidence that steadied his line. Teammates like Lanny McDonald leaned on him to dig out pucks and take hits, creating space for their sniping. In January 1978, the Leafs traded Don to the Colorado Rockies, a floundering franchise in Denver's high altitude. The move cut deep. Toronto's fans had become family, but Don saw it as a fresh canvas. The Rockies were a patchwork team, miles from playoff hopes, but Don embraced the grind. He became a penalty kill cornerstone, facing top lines with a dogged resolve. His two-way play flourished, averaging nearly a point per game in 1978 to 79. Teammates like Wilf Payment leaned on his steadiness, and coach Don Cherry, a hockey sage, called him the glue guy, the player who kept the locker room from fracturing. Off the ice, Don's world deepened. During a summer visit to Kamloops, he'd met Terry, a nurse whose wit and warmth matched his own. Their romance bloomed through letters and late-night calls, her voice a lifeline during road trips. They married in 1979, and Terry moved to Denver, transforming their cramped apartment into a haven. She cooked chili for teammates, hosted poker nights, and cheered from McNichols Arena, her shouts piercing the crowd. Their bond was a quiet defiance of hockey's chaos, a vow to find joy in stolen moments, a diner breakfast, a walk through Denver's snowy streets. In December 1980, Don was traded to the Edmonton Oilers, a young team crackling with potential around a prodigy named Wayne Gretzky. Coach Glenn Sather saw Don as a steadying force, a two-way center to shield Gretzky from defensive burdens. Don arrived at Northland's Coliseum, gear bag over his shoulder, and shook hands with the Great One, whose quiet intensity mirrored his own. Practices were electric. Gretzky's brilliance elevated everyone, and Don focused on the grunt work, winning draws, back-checking, teaching rookies like Mark Messier the subtle habits that grounded a shift. His presence was a calming pulse in a locker room, buzzing with dreams of dynasty. Edmonton's depth, however, was a hurdle. With Gretzky, Messier, and Jari Kurri dominating, roster spots were scarce. In 1981, Don was sent to the Witchah Wind, Edmonton's Central Hockey League affiliate. The assignment could have crushed a lesser spirit, but Don treated it like a stage. In Wichita, he was a virtuoso, centering the top line and power play. His stats dazzled: 87 goals, 129 assists in 192 games. But his mentorship was his true mark. He taught young forwards to read defenders' movements, to time a forecheck with precision. Fans filled the Kansas Coliseum, chanting "Ashby, Ashby," as he sliced through defenses. A local paper crowned him the Wichita Maestro, and Sather vowed he'd return to Edmonton for 1981-82. On May 30th, 1981, Don and Terry drove through British Columbia's Okanagan Valley, the road winding past orchards heavy with spring blooms. The radio played Springsteen's Born to Run, Don drumming the steering wheel, his crooked smirk lighting the car. They spoke of training camp, a cabin by Shuswap Lake, children who'd skate before they walked, dreams as vivid as the sunlight. It was a moment of perfect ordinariness, the kind that stitches a life together. Then, in an instant, the world collapsed. A pickup truck veered across the center line, smashing head-on into their car. Metal buckled, glass shattered, and silence swallowed the air. Emergency crews battled through wreckage, rushing Don and Terry to Kelowna General Hospital. Doctors fought to stabilize Don, but his injuries, massive internal trauma, were too grave. At 26, as the sun sank, he slipped away, his heart stilling. Terry, with a fractured jaw and deep lacerations, survived, waking to a reality fractured beyond repair. The news rippled like a shockwave. In Edmonton, the Oilers' locker room, typically alive with laughter, went mute. Gretzky, barely 20, stared at his stick, unmoored. Sather canceled practice, his voice breaking as he spoke to the team. In Wichita, fans gathered outside the arena, leaving flowers and jerseys scrawled with thanks. Kamloops grieved its son, the rink where Don first skated now, a vigil of candles and notes. The funeral on June 3rd drew hundreds. Oilers owner Peter Pocklington, Sather, teammates, childhood friends. Sather's eulogy named Don the professional's professional, his voice catching on the weight of loss. Terry, bandaged and fragile, spoke briefly. Don loved you all. Keep playing for him. Her words a thread of resolve amid her pain. Terry's recovery was a marathon of anguish. Surgeries to mend her jaw, physical therapy to regain strength, and nights haunted by the crash's echo. She returned to Kamloops, leaning on family, but Don's absence was a constant ache. His jersey stayed folded in a cedar chest, his skates untouched in a closet, relics of a life interrupted. She resumed nursing, pouring her grief into caring for others. But Don's memory was a private sanctuary, carried in quiet moments. A glance at his photo, a memory of his laugh. Her resilience was a testament to their bond, a refusal to let loss define her, even as it shaped her every step. The Oilers soared to Stanley Cups in 1984 and 1985, but Don's influence lingered. Gretzky, in a rare introspective moment, credited Don's face-off tips for early confidence. Messier cited his extra laps as a spark for his own relentless drive. In Wichita, players Don mentored, now chasing NHL dreams, carried his lessons like a compass. His stats, 188 NHL games, 40 goals, 56 assists, were modest, but his impact was immeasurable. He was the teammate who'd skate through a wall, the veteran who steadied a rookie with a nod, the center who made chaos navigable. Don's story is a paradox, brief yet eternal. In today's analytics era, he'd be a stats darling, his shot suppression and play driving metrics gold for data-driven GMs. But his true legacy defies numbers. It's in his mantra, borrowed from Allen, skate the extra mile. It's in his philosophy, hockey humbles, so stay hungry, echoed by every grinder who laces up. For fans, Don is a call to see the game's quiet heroes, the third-line center winning a key draw, the penalty killer diving for a block. They're hockey's pulse, and Don was their archetype. In an unwritten timeline, Don might have anchored Edmonton's third line, his name on the cup, his wisdom shaping juniors as a coach. He and Terry might have raised kids skating Kamloops ponds, their laughter his echo. But fate, in one cruel swerve, rewrote it all. That fragility charges every shift with meaning. Watch a face-off, and no players carry the ghosts of those like Don, gone too soon, but never absent. In Kamloops rinks, you might sense him, a whisper in the cold, a shadow on the boards. Don Ashby, number 14, lives in hockey's soul, urging us to chase dreams fiercely, lift others, and savor the now. Because life, like a game, can shift in a single shattering second.